Hi, and welcome back to the Results Sent, where we give you tips on financial planning, career development, and how to strive towards financial independence. Have you ever wondered where all your money goes at the end of the month? Do you wish you had a better strategy for managing your finances? Do you find yourself seemingly making a decent salary, but living paycheck to paycheck every month? Well, the truth is you're not alone. We've all been in your shoes. In fact, a recent Gallup poll found that only a third of Americans maintained a written budget of any kind. However, this isn't surprising considering that budgeting, managing our personal finances, and financial literacy as a whole weren't skills that we were taught growing up. But that doesn't have to be the case. In the first part of this video, we'll talk through the preparation phase of budgeting. In the second part, we'll discuss some principles that have helped us set up our budget and stick to the habit of budgeting. And in the third part, we'll give you an in-depth walkthrough of a sample budget template that you'll be able to download, tweak, and personalize to suit your needs. If this sounds interesting to you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel below. Now let's get into the video.
So let's talk about the preparation phase. So the first step in the preparation phase is to change your perspective about budgeting. Some people, including us in the not so distant past, saw budgets as a burden or constraint. We associated budgeting with pictures of extreme frugality and penny pinching. But the reality is quite different. You can think about a budget as a roadmap, a plan to achieve your financial goals. A budget should be a tool to help you spend money on the things you truly care about and less on the things you don't. The second step in the preparation process is to analyze your spending for the past 1 to 3 months. If you don't track your expenses and review them regularly, then it's really difficult to tell where your money goes. You might have a vague idea, but when it comes to numbers, precision is important. Going through your bank statements and categorizing your spending will open up your eyes to what areas you're overspending in, how much money you're saving, and if that matches to your future expectations and goals. The final step in the preparation phase is to think about and decide what your financial goals are. This is important because we found that budgeting works best when there are specific financial goals and milestones attached to them. Is your goal to save for a down payment so that you can purchase your dream house in 3 years? Are you saving towards a trip to the Maldives for your birthday next year? Or is your goal simply to get out of debt? These goals will be different for everyone, and you need to take out the time to think about what you want for yourself and for your financial future, because this will impact how you structure your budget and where you decide to place more or less money.
So now let's move on to the principles. Principle number 1 is to account for every dollar. To achieve this, we used a budgeting system called the zero-sum budgeting system. This simply means that at the end of the month, your income minus your expenses should equal 0. For example, if you cover all your expenses during the month and you have $500 left over, you aren't done with your budget quite yet. You must tell those $500 where to go. Does that $500 go to a savings account to pay for a trip to the Maldives in January? Or does it go towards paying down your student loans? So the point of this budget is to give every dollar a job and to leave nothing behind. Every dollar must have a predetermined purpose that gets you to the financial position you want to be in the future. Principle number 2 is to pay yourself first. Now, conventional wisdom tells us that you pay your bills first and then save whatever is left. The pay yourself strategy essentially flips that upside down and says you save and invest first, and then everything else comes after that. It essentially prioritizes using your income towards your savings goals first before putting money towards expenses. Now, this doesn't mean you won't pay your bills or attend to your other financial responsibilities. It just means that you shift your mindset from prioritizing spending to prioritizing saving and investing. The third principle is to build in allowances for guilt-free spending into your budget. This is a super important point. Before we started budgeting, we had all the preconceived notions about it. We thought it was going to be constraining, rigid, judgmental, and just painful. And don't get me wrong, budgeting can be all these things if it isn't done the right way. But over time, we've added categories into our budget that allow us to set money aside that we can use for whatever we want. So for example, we each put aside personal money that we use for whatever we want with no guilt. We can spend it on clothes, skincare, gadgets, food, video game purchases, anything. Here's an example of how this personal money comes in handy. We used to spend a ton of money on restaurants and takeout, like a lot. Way more than we are ready to admit. Early on in the year, we decided that we were going to cut back drastically on that. But just deciding to cut back didn't really stop us from craving nice restaurant food. But we found a way to compromise on this. Whenever we exhausted our monthly allowance for takeout, if we wanted more takeout, it would have to come from our personal money. That way we stayed within budget and still got what we wanted by sacrificing just a little of our guilt-free money. We applied this mostly to restaurants and takeout, but you can apply it to any category where you tend to overspend. Principle number 4 is to track your spending activity and check in regularly. There's no point having a map if you never reference it, and that's the same with a budget. You need to set aside time to check in regularly and compare your savings and spending to your budget to ensure that you're on track to meet your financial goals. For us, we have a monthly meeting we call Tea and Budgets at the end of the month, where we make some tea, sit at our table or the couch, and review our spending. We identify categories where we've overspent and make a plan to improve the next month.
Right, if you've watched up to this point, thanks for sticking around. Now we're going to walk you through our Google Sheets template and show you what the different sections mean and how to go through and fill out your budget. If you'd like to download a copy of this template, we'll leave a link in the description box below. All we ask is that you please subscribe to our channel to access that template. All right, so let's go to the computer and I'll show you exactly how to walk through this budget and fill it out. All right, so I'm gonna walk you through the budget, walk you through some of the sections and what some of the spending categories mean. And hopefully this gives you an idea of how to think about your budget, how to walk through and ensure that you're accounting for every dollar and you're following the principles we outlined in the last section. So let's dive right into the budget. You can see like we have a few different sections. You have the income section that kind of accounts for whatever money is coming in. You have the savings section that includes longer term savings and investments, your 401ks, your Roth IRAs, your HSAs, health savings account, investing in the stock market, whatever long-term savings accounts or whatever long-term savings you're targeting, that's where you're gonna have it. And then you have your goals section. These are more short-term goals that you're saving towards. So if that's a down payment, if it's saving for a new car, maybe camera equipment, saving for travel, whatever that might be, that's the section to put it. So you have your essentials. We've broken that into some common groups. So we have household, food, auto, or transport. And essentially you're going to, it's just easier to kind of group them into these subcategories, just so you could see the different totals for each one. So in this case, household would include whatever you spend on living expenses, your house, your mortgage, internet, cable, utilities, all of that. So food is essentially whatever you spend in a month on groceries or restaurants. And it's definitely debatable if restaurants is an essential. In our template it is, because we talked about how we enjoy going out to eat or ordering takeout. But you could definitely move this into discretionary if you want and just leave groceries in here. But for the sake of this template, it's right here. Auto or transport, this includes whatever you spend on your car, or if you take public transportation, put in whatever costs in there. Then discretionary is definitely where you have, I think, the most leeway to, if you're looking to cut down costs, I think that's the section where you could definitely eliminate a few things and try to keep that as lean as possible. Then debt and miscellaneous is just essentially whatever debt you have. If it's credit card debt, if it's student loan debt, put that in there. Put in the monthly payment, and that it calculates what the annual payment is. And you could get a glance of how much your debt is. If you look at the end section, it kind of highlights whatever amount you've put into the total income. Since we haven't put any total expenses, it's still $0 right now. And you can see the section where it says dollars needed in a job, and that's 3,150. And that's essentially, one of the principles where we say every dollar must be given a job. This gives you a quick way to have a glance at what that relationship looks like. So what is your total income? What are your total expenses? And then how much is left that is unassigned? All right, so now we're ready to go through and fill this out. So let's walk through the income section. In this case, your gross pay is obviously the total amount of money that comes in before taxes. And then the net pay is where you want to pay attention to. So this is the amount that is shown in your paycheck or in your pay stub. And if you need to reference that to make sure the exact amount is being reflected, you can open up your paycheck and your pay stub and look at that. So in this case, I've just put in $3,000. So let's say the take-home pay is $3,000 after taxes and deductions. Side hustles, let's say I earn $100 from side hustles. I earn $50 from passive income. So my total income is $3,150. Let's move on to savings. So Like I said, this is kind of the portion where when you think about financial independence, or you think about retirement, or being able to support yourself in the future, or just making good financial decisions, I think this is the section you need to focus on. You need to max this out as much as possible. So take advantage of your 401ks, because this is tax deferred money. This is money that is allowed to grow untaxed. And on top of that, it's also growing in the stock market that returns an average of 8 to 10% a year. And that's great because you're beating inflation if you're investing in the stock market. And if you're investing tax deferred money, that effect is even multiplied. Definitely you want to take advantage of your 401k. Common advice is to max it out, but not everyone is going to be able to max it out, and that's understandable. But at least you want to get to the point where you're at least maxing out up until whatever employer match is offered. So in this case, let's just assume I'm going to put in $500 for my health savings account. Let's say I'm going to put in $100 a month, and for stock market investment, let's say I'm going to put in $300 a month. So that brings it in total to $900 a month. And you could see that I have an indicator of what my savings rate is based on whatever amount I put in here. That's it for savings. Let's move on to goals. Like I said, this would be your own personalized set of goals. So feel free to remove whatever doesn't apply here. So let's fill this out. So for travel, let's say I'm going to save $100. For my emergency fund, let's say I'm going to put in $200. For new camera gear, let's say I put in $50. And for my home renovation, it's not really a huge priority right now, so let's say I put in $50. For essentials, so there is some wiggle room, but a lot of these expenses tend to be fixed. So let's just go through and kind of fill these out. You're going to be referencing your bank statement or your list of transactions just to make sure you're being accurate. So for internet, let's say this is mostly fixed, so let's say it's $80. For your cell phone, let's say it's 50. Household items, 50. Bills and utilities, let's say 60. And then it gives me like a total household amount here. Let's move on to groceries. Let's say you spend $300 a month on groceries. And on restaurants, you say you're gonna put in $100. So that's $400 total on food. And then for car payments, for the sake of this example, let's say we have a single car payment that's $150. Let's say we spend $40 a month on gas. Car insurance, let's say we spend about $50 a month. So let's say it's $30. Maintenance is something that you want to keep in mind. From time to time, if you own a car, you're definitely going to put in some money, either every 3 months or every 6 months to maintain that car. So you definitely want to be planning for that on a monthly basis. So let's say we put in $20 a month aside for maintenance. This is it for auto and transportation. I could see each section has a total, and I could also see I have a total for the whole group. So in this case, I have a total for auto, I have a total for food, I have a total for household, and I have a total for all of them. So that would give you like an overview. And if you feel like, okay, you're spending a little too much on household, for example, you could adjust any of those values here. And then discretionary, I think this is kind of where you have the most leeway to make cuts and to cut back a bit on your spending. This is definitely a place where you want to go through your statement and make sure you review each and every one of your online subscriptions. Make sure you're not just subscribing to a service that you don't use that frequently. So in this case, let's say I use all these services. Let's say $10 for Spotify, $2 for Audible, $10 for Amazon Prime, $2 for G Suite, $2 for Google Photos, and then $4 for Bluehost. You can see I spend, it gives me a breakdown of how much I actually spend on online subscriptions. So you want to reflect that here. And then personal money. We talked about building in guilt-free spending into your budget. And that's what this personal money is. Some people call it fun money, personal money, whatever you want to call it. It's essentially money that you set aside each month for yourself that you could use for whatever you want. And you don't really have to account for the details of that money. It's essentially use it for video games, use it for shopping, use it for food, whatever you want, right? And I think psychologically this kind of helps because it makes the budget feel a little less constraining when you have at least some leeway to spend some of the money you make without guilt, without having to explain yourself, without having to feel bad that you're wasting money. So it's definitely something that's really helped us in our budgeting journey. And I think it's something I would advise anyone to include in their budgets. But obviously you don't want to spend the bulk of your money in personal money or fund money. You definitely want to prioritize your savings, your investments, and sections like that. So in this case, let's say I put aside $100 each month for myself. So for credit card fees, if you have a bunch of credit cards that aren't $0 annual fee credit cards, which we have a bunch because we have a lot of travel credit cards, then you want to be accounting for that expense on a monthly basis, because remember, these are annual expenses, they're one-time payments, right? But the idea of this is that you want to account for it on a monthly basis so that you understand how much of your money on a monthly basis is going to those expenses. So let's say I have 2 credit cards that I have to pay $100 for each of the annual fees. So that's going to be 200 divided by 12, and I could do the math in here to get that value. So that's $16.67 every month to make up for that $200 annual fee. And you don't really have to put this in a separate account, although you could. But the purpose of doing this is you essentially just want to account for that. You want to make sure that on a monthly basis, you understand what proportion of your income is going towards paying or maintaining those credit cards. If you have a pet, you definitely want to be setting aside money for upkeep. So, food, toys, all of that. So let's say I put aside $50 a month for a puppy. So that's for pet. And then shopping, if you shop a lot, this is one of the categories that people don't really like to monitor a lot, just because of the guilt that comes with shopping. But the good thing about budgeting is if you predetermine how much you're going to spend exactly, and that doesn't really affect your overall financial landscape, it doesn't affect your savings, your investments, then it's a bit easier to kind of come to terms with spending money on things that bring you joy. So let's say I put aside $50 a month to shop. And then the next section is debt and miscellaneous. So debt is definitely something you want to get rid of as soon as possible, especially if those are high interest debts like credit card debt. Definitely want to pay those down as soon as possible. As soon as you have your emergency fund ready and done, the next thing you want to tackle is debt. And you could decide to tackle debt first too as well. It just depends on what your financial priorities are. So in this case, definitely try to pay down your credit card debt as soon as possible. For student loans, the interest rates aren't as high. So let's say my monthly payment for a credit card with a balance on it is $50. So this is how much minimum I pay towards that credit card. Now I could increase that if I want to get rid of the debt a bit quicker. Let's say for sake of this example, I'm paying $50 a month. And then for student loans, let's say my student loan payment is $100. So right now I filled out everything. Now the next place to pay attention to is this section. You could see that the total income I filled in is $3,150. My total expenses so far, based on what I've budgeted, is $2,726. The money that's left, the dollars still needing a job, is $423.33. So essentially, this is the money that I haven't assigned any job to. I haven't assigned any category to, essentially. And the whole purpose or the whole point of this budgeting system is that every single dollar should be assigned a category. You should give every single dollar a job to do. So we're going to go through again and make sure we can spend this $423, essentially. So let's say, in the spirit of paying myself first, I want to increase my 401k contributions to $600. And I want to invest a little more into the stock market. So let's say I make that $400. I could go back and check how much is left. So I still have $323 left. So this is kind of where it gets fun, because this is where you decide where your priorities are, where you're spending a little less or you're spending a little more, and you're trying to move the money around. So in this case, let's say I also want to spend a little more on restaurants. So let's say I want to spend an extra $50 on restaurants. I could also look at my goals too as well. Obviously, funding my emergency fund is a priority. So I want to add a little more into that. Let's check back in with, we still have $173 left. So let's see, what else do I want to spend on? New camera gear for YouTube. Let's say, I want to do that quicker. I want to try and get that done as soon as possible. So let's say I add $50 to that. And then let us see. Oh yeah, let's say I want to spend a little more on shopping every month. I feel comfortable with my investments and savings, and now I just want to put some more money into shopping. So I've put in $50. I still have $73 left. So let's see what we're gonna spend that money on. Okay, let us say I want to even put a little more into my emergency fund. So 373.33. The dollar still needing a job is now 0, so every single dollar has been accounted for. So this is the point where you want to get your budget to make sure that like everything is filled out, every single dollar is accounted for. So the great thing about this budget or this budgeting style is you could start to simulate different scenarios, right? Like once everything is balanced, you could start to look into scenarios like, what if I earn an extra $100 in passive income, right? You know, what if I make this 150, and what if I earn an extra, $300 or an extra $200 in my side hustles? Where does that leave me? And then you could see, oh, that's an extra 300. And then you could decide where you want to put that. Let's say you want to put a little more into your 401k. You could say, I'm gonna put an extra 200 to my 401k, and then I'm going to put an extra 100 in the stock market. You could see that's also increasing your savings rate. That's essentially how this budget works. Let us know if you have any questions. You can leave those in the comment section below.
Thanks for watching our budgeting video. We hope we've given you some ideas on how you can get started with budgeting and begin to conquer your personal finances. If this video has been helpful and beneficial to you, you can go ahead and like this video and subscribe to our channel below. Also, if you want to get a head start on your budgeting plans for next year, you can grab your very own copy of our Google Sheet budgeting template by following the link in the description box below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.